Hey guys, today I'm going to be reading you Cinderella. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful young girl who lived with her father in a big old house. Her mother had died when she was a baby. They lived happily together until the girl's father married again. His new wife was a proud, unkind woman who had two mean, ugly daughters. All three of them treated the girl like a servant, and they shouted orders at her all day long. Every morning, the poor girl had to get up very early to clean the hearth and make the fire. Her clothes were always covered with soot and cinders, so her stepsisters laughed at her and called her Cinderella. They were cruel to Cinderella because she was beautiful, and they were jealous of her. She only had very old clothes to wear, but no matter what she had on, Cinderella was still much prettier than her stepsisters. One day, some very special invitations came to the house. The king's son had asked everyone to a grand ball at the royal palace. The ugly sisters were so excited they talked about nothing else for days. Cinderella asked if she could go to the ball, but her stepsisters just shrieked with laughter at the idea. "What? You go to a ball looking like that?" said one. "Ugh, they would never let you into the royal palace," said the other. On the day of the ball, the house was full of activity. Cinderella ran errands for her sisters endlessly. She had to iron their petticoats, clean their shoes, powder their faces, and put ribbons in their hair. She was a kind-hearted girl and tried her best to make them look beautiful. But even the most expensive dresses and sparkling jewelry could not make them pretty. They were so mean, spiteful, and bossy that they always looked ugly. The sisters left for the ball without even thanking Cinderella. The poor girl sat down in the kitchen and cried. She was lonely and sad. Suddenly, the room glowed with a golden light. Cinderella looked up. A beautiful lady was standing in front of her. Everything about her seemed to sparkle. "Don't cry, Cinderella," said the lady. "I am your fairy godmother, and I am going to make your wishes come true." "Cinderella, you must go and get a pumpkin," said her fairy godmother. The girl found a big yellow pumpkin in the garden. "Now, get the mouse trap and the rat trap," said the fairy. "And behind a stone in the garden are 6 lizards. Bring them here." Cinderella brought everything quickly. Inside the mouse trap were 6 live mice. There was 1 fat rat in the rat trap. Then the fairy godmother touched the pumpkin with her magic wand. The pumpkin grew and grew until it turned into a beautiful golden coach. The fairy godmother opened the door of the mouse trap. The 6 mice ran out one by one, and she touched them with her magic wand. Each mouse turned into a fine white horse. The rat turned into a fat, jolly coachman, and the lizards became 6 splendid footmen. "There," said the fairy godmother. "Now you can go to the ball." Cinderella looked down at her rags. "But I cannot go like this," she said. "Everyone will laugh at me." The fairy godmother touched her with her magic wand. At once, her rags turned into the most beautiful ball gown. In front of Cinderella's feet was a pair of dainty little glass slippers. She put them on. "Remember, the magic will only last until midnight," said the fairy godmother. "You must be back before then." "At midnight, your coach will turn back into a pumpkin, and you will find yourself in rags again," said Cinderella's fairy godmother. "I will be home before midnight," promised Cinderella. Then she thanked her fairy godmother and waved goodbye from the glittering coach. When Cinderella walked into the great ballroom at the palace, all the guests turned to look at her. She was the most beautiful girl they had ever seen. The music stopped, and the prince strode up to greet her. The handsome prince asked Cinderella to dance, and from then on he had eyes only for her. Around and around the great ballroom they whirled. All the other guests watched the radiant couple. Everyone wondered who the mysterious beauty could be. Even Cinderella's stepsisters did not recognize her. They stood at the side of the room and watched enviously. The prince and Cinderella were falling in love. Cinderella was so happy she completely forgot about the time. Then she heard the clock begin to strike midnight. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cinderella remembered the fairy godmother's warning and ran from the ballroom. 5, 6, 7, 8. She ran down the great staircase. One of her glass slippers came off, but she could not stop. 9, 10, 11. She ran across the lawn. 12. As the clock struck 12, Cinderella reached the golden coach. Before her eyes, it turned into a pumpkin again. Her footmen turned back into lizards and scurried away. Worst of all, Cinderella was dressed in her old rags once more, and she walked home in the dark, alone. The prince had followed Cinderella. As he was running down the stairs, he found her tiny glass slipper and picked it up. But the mysterious beauty had vanished. The prince knew that the dainty slipper could fit only Cinderella's foot. The very next day he issued a royal decree. The prince announced that he would marry the first girl whose foot fitted the dainty glass slipper. A royal messenger went from house to house carrying the slipper on a silk cushion. He was ordered to visit every home in the kingdom, from humble cottages to grand estates. Every girl would be given the chance to try on the slipper. Servant girls as well as proud ladies tried to push their feet into the tiny glass slipper, but it fitted no one. The royal messenger was giving up hope when at last he reached Cinderella's house. The ugly sisters fought over who should try the slipper first. "Ugh, your feet are too fat," said one. "Well, your feet are much too long," said the other. First the elder, then the younger sister tried to force her foot into the slipper. Of course, neither sister could squeeze her foot into the little shoe. Just as the messenger was about to leave, he noticed Cinderella sweeping the kitchen. "This young lady must also try the slipper," he said. The ugly sisters looked at Cinderella and shrieked with laughter. But the messenger called Cinderella, and she held out her tiny foot. The slipper fitted perfectly. The ugly sisters gasped with surprise. Just then, Cinderella's fairy godmother appeared. She waved her magic wand, and instantly Cinderella's rags changed back to her wonderful silk ball gown. Everyone recognized her as the beautiful princess. The royal messenger bowed low. Then he rushed off to tell the prince the good news. Cinderella's two stepsisters were very ashamed. They curtsied in front of her and asked her forgiveness. The delighted prince and Cinderella were married and were never parted again. Cinderella was so good and kind-hearted that she forgave her sisters for everything that they had ever done, and they all lived happily ever after.